In the last episode we talked about becoming a liveaboard and how to do that. In this episode we're going to specifically address buying liveaboard boats.
This video and the previous one Liz just mentioned are all covered in a comprehensive guide that we've put together that goes into even more detail than this video and the last video.
So what is the best boat then, Jamie?
Ooh, what's the best boat? Well, unfortunately there is no magic answer. There is no such thing as the perfect liveaboard boat, because boat buying is full of compromises really, and each and every one of you have different requirements and needs of your floating home. But we are going to attempt to give some pointers, and we hope that it helps any of you out there who are looking to buy a liveaboard boat.
We've broken the video down into 7 sections, just to make it a little bit easier to follow.
Do your research.
Do you want a Bluewater or a lightweight production boat?
Which construction material?
Would you prefer a monohull or a catamaran?
New versus second-hand.
Does size matter?
And the mechanics of buying a boat.
First of all then, do your research, and a good place to start is yachtworld.com. They list boats for sale all over the world, and it's a great way to get a general idea of the prices that people are asking. You can see inside the boats the different types of layouts there are available, and get just a general picture of where to go and have a good old nosy around.
So once you've familiarised yourself with some of the models on Yacht World, try jumping into some of the forums. And we've mentioned these before. There's YBW, there's Cruisers Forum, and of course there's Facebook. But like any forum, use them wisely. Don't jump in and ask the question, what boat should I buy? Because you'll be received with ridicule. So normally the best way is, first of all, search the forum first, because no doubt someone would have already asked the same question. If you don't find the answer, then post up a question, but have an idea, a rough idea of what you're looking for. Try and provide as much information as possible so that people can help you.
Many of the best sailing magazines do regular reviews of all new boats and some used boats as well. You usually have to purchase them as a PDF. It's not very expensive, but if you go online and Google, you should be able to find all kinds of resources once you've got a rough idea of the boat that interests you most.
Moving away from research online, actually physically go and see the boats. Get in touch with brokers. Be aware, of course, that the way brokers operate is they'll try and sell you the biggest boat possible, but use that to your advantage. Allow yourself to be shown boats that maybe fall outside of your budget, or boats that you hadn't considered. At least go out there and have a look to see what kind of thing is out there and what's available.
Get on as many boats as you can and actually sail them. Get out there and crew for other people. There are lots of ways and means in which you can get onto boats and actually learn what the boat feels like sailing it.
Yeah, and check out comparisons between equivalent sized boats. So say a 43-foot Beneteau versus, I don't know, 42-foot Halberg Rassi. You'll find big differences between not only the layout but the performance of these boats as well. So try and get the comparison of similar sized boats.
In fact, by crewing on boats, that was something that you used to your advantage when we were looking to buy our boat. You had a pretty good idea of what you wanted and what you didn't want, didn't you?
I mean, I spent about 9 months just delivering boats, and I delivered all different types of boats all over Europe and across the Atlantic as well, and it gave me a very good idea of what I thought would be a good liveaboard and perhaps not such a good liveaboard.
Most boats can usually be broken down into one of 2 categories, either a blue water sailing boat or a lightweight production boat. A little unfair to use lightweight production because pretty much most of the boats we see are production boats, but just for the purposes of this particular video we're going to call them blue waters and lightweights.
So lightweight production boats, they're unfairly called plastic fantastics by the sailing snobs out there. And really the definition of production boat is that they use standardised production methods in order to keep the costs down.
On the whole, they are cheaper than heavier blue water cruisers. So examples are
Beneteau, Jeannot, Hansa and Bavaria. And almost all of these are of GRP or fiberglass production.
They tend to be used for weekend cruising, and they tend to have very large rear cockpits for excellent entertaining.
They also have a lot of space down below, and often at the detriment of storage space.
They have a lighter displacement, so they tend to be much quicker in light winds.
Some of the disadvantages of the lightweight production boats is that they are generally more cheaply built, and you'll probably find that their hulls are thinner, although this is offset by more modern construction materials. They can be much more skittish in heavier weather.
And they can all rather look alike, so it's difficult to make them stand out from the crowd, if that's important to you.
Sometimes they'll have a bolt-on keel rather than encapsulated, and often they won't have a skeg, which of course helps protect both the rudder and the prop.
Bluewater cruisers are called that because they are designed specifically to handle heavy weather in offshore conditions. They are heavier displacement, and so they tend to be a lot more solid when you need them to be.
When they're bought new, quite often they are built to the purchaser's specification. So they will be laid out, and they will have that ability to change the layout according to what that purchaser wants. Some examples of Bluewater cruiser: Oyster, Halberg Rassi, Swan, Amel, Sweden, Naiad. And these are just the Bluewater cruisers that are built in Europe. There are also Bluewater cruisers built elsewhere around the world. On a Bluewater cruiser, there's a higher possibility that the mast is going to be keel stepped rather than deck stepped. And a lot of Bluewater cruisers are what we call over-rigged, which basically means they have a lot more cable and thicker cable holding up the masts.
Many of them are centre cockpit, just like Esper, and that gives you a sense of more safety in those really bad rough conditions, but of course it does mean usually that the cockpit is a bit smaller.
Because of these benefits of Bluewater cruisers, they are generally more expensive. And that also means, of course, that the upkeep makes them more expensive as well. A 12mm cable is going to be more expensive to replace than a 10 or 8mm cable.
Of course, these are really just generalisations. There are plenty of people sailing around the world on lightweight production boats, and there are plenty, if you look carefully, of Bluewater cruisers out there that you can get for a song. So there are a lot of different construction materials, and we'll go through each of them right now.
Starting with probably the most popular, which is GRP, which is otherwise known as fiberglass. GRP is probably the most popular choice among liveaboards, mainly because there are more of them. It's light, it's easy to repair, and it's available all over the world. The single biggest disadvantage is that if you hit a rock or a reef, the rock is going to win. And we should just mention osmosis. Osmosis is blisters in the hull caused by water getting behind the gel coat and spreading. Now this is more of a cosmetic thing than anything else, and thousands of boats sail the world with osmotic blisters. It is treatable and non-threatening, and you've no doubt heard the expression that no boat has ever sunk of osmosis.
Steel is probably the second most popular, in our experience anyway, of liveaboards, and for some weird reason they're really popular with our Australian friends. Steel, obviously, it's very strong, it's very sturdy. If you hit something, the chances are the something's going to come off worse than you are, so if you're very comfortable going through reefs and in shallow areas.
It's also very easy to work on as well, and you can work on it in most boatyards around the world.
The main disadvantage of a steel boat, as far as we're concerned, is that the corrosion starts inside the boat and works out, which does mean that for all your maintenance you've got to be able to get to it from the inside, and that does mean that all your beautiful interiors have to be easily take out and put backable.
And I suppose like GRP and the epoxies that we use to build fiberglass boats, with steel there's good steel and there's bad steel, so it probably helps to find out where the boat was made and what steel was used.
The next construction to think about is aluminium, and for some strange reason we seem to see a lot of French people in aluminium boats. Now, it has the advantage of both GRP and steel in that it is very light and it's very strong. So that's great. The main disadvantage, though, is the electrical currents that you can find in waters, particularly around marinas, can cause real problems with corrosion on aluminium boats.
Yeah, and that's something you've got to stay on top of and be aware of. And also, not all boatyards can deal with aluminium. You may find that the local guy is very good at welding stainless, but doesn't have so much experience with aluminium. And from what I understand as well, I think welding with aluminium it can be quite messy from a welder's point of view. The other thing with aluminium boats is that you shouldn't really paint them. Paint doesn't adhere to aluminium very well, which is why quite a lot of the French boats Liz talked about, especially like the ovnis, for example, they're just bare metal.
Carbon fibre. Who wouldn't love a carbon fibre boat? Really light, they're quite tough, I believe, is that right?
Well, they're very, carbon fibre is a very strong material, but carbon fibre is actually, believe it or not, prone to shatter. So you tend to find that when something goes wrong with a carbon fibre mast, it will shatter rather than bend and flex. But really, I think carbon fibre is the preserve of racing boats.
Yeah, they're very, very fast boats, and they are very, very expensive boats.
Next up we have ferro cement boats. Not so popular these days, but they do still make ferro cement. One of the disadvantages is that they are built around a wire mesh, and if you don't use a good steel wire mesh then they can corrode from inside. But of course the advantage is that repairs are very easy. Now they're supposed to be super strong, but we do know of cases where ferro cement boats have hit objects underwater and sunk.
And there's wood. And aren't wooden boats beautiful? And don't we all have the dream of sailing off into the sunset in a beautiful wooden boat as the sun goes down and the sea changes in all those different hues of blue? They are beautiful boats. And in fact, they're pretty easy to maintain around the world because there are wooden boats everywhere. Southeast Asia in particular, most of the fishing boats, all the fishing boats are wood, so there's plenty of wood to get hold of, and there are plenty of specialist carpenters who can really help you maintain a wooden boat over here.
Well, you say they're easy to maintain. I think they're easy to maintain when you have a big crew of people that are prepared to spend their days polishing and varnishing and revarnishing. Wooden boats as a liveaboard cruiser is a real labour of love. Personally, I agree, they look beautiful, but they're just not practical.
There'll be no time to do anything else other than maintain them.
And finally, we have a special mention for bamboo. And we've included this building material after we met Dirk and his family up in Talaga in Malaysia. And this South African family rebuilt a classic schooner, the original America's Cup it was based on. And Dirk built this boat. He and his wife Michelle built this boat together, built the whole thing out of bamboo. The hull, the deck, even the blocks, everything is made of bamboo. And he has proven that bamboo is a good, workable and cheap material to work with.
Monohulls versus catamarans. Now this is a huge subject and it has been covered in lots of places, including on our video channel. We'll point you right now to a link where you can see a whole video devoted to this particular topic, but it is worth considering when you want to buy a boat for liveaboarding, whether you want one or the other.
So like monohulls, catamarans can come in all different flavours. We've met plenty of aluminium catamarans out there, and I guess you can have your production line cats and then your one-off cats as well. But one thing is that they will offer a very different sailing experience and a liveaboard experience to monohulls. It's either or, isn't it?
Yeah, we haven't got an opinion one way or the other. It's one of those things. It's a personal choice. So you decide, mono or cat.
And check out that video. Not only the video that we did, but also have a look through some of the comments as well. Yeah. There's a lot of good suggestions in there.
Do you buy new or second hand? Putting budget to one side for one moment. If you buy a new boat, you have the opportunity to spec it exactly the way you want it. You can end up with the perfect boat, your idea of the perfect boat. So yeah, maybe buying a new boat would be great to get the exact boat that you want, but it will be at a price.
A very big price, and that is quite simply depreciation. Like a car, the moment you take that boat out into the water, its value does this.
So like most cruisers, we bought second hand. There are loads of them on the market. There are really great choices out there for a second hand used boat.
And the great thing with buying a second hand boat is that quite often they will come equipped with almost everything that you're going to need. So you can literally buy it off the vendor, slip the lines, and you've got a fully kitted out boat.
So the biggest disadvantage with a second-hand boat, a used boat, is that you don't know its history. It could have gone through all kinds of rather nasty escapades in the past that are not apparent when you look at it. So perhaps you might need to change the rigging, you might have to change the engine. Things like this may not be really obvious when you first look at it. We advise that you take a surveyor with you.
Does size matter? Well, like all boaty things, there are advantages and disadvantages. The obvious advantage of buying a smaller boat is the cost. Everything is going to be much cheaper. The bigger your boat, the more expensive items are going to become, whether it's electrics or plumbing and rigging. These become exponentially more expensive the bigger you go. But of course the advantage of buying a bigger boat is that you have more storage for all your crap. Also, there is an argument that the bigger you go, the better the performance of the boat. Bigger boats tend to cope with heavier weather that much better than a smaller boat. This is not always true, but as a general rule.
And remember that the size of your boat will count when you're in a marina. The bigger the boat, the more your fees will be. And if you're on a catamaran, sometimes it can be double for the same length mono. And now finally we get on to the nitty-gritty of actually purchasing a boat. By this stage, you've got a pretty good idea about what you want. You know what construction you want, you know what size you want, you know what your budget is, you know what the layout is. So you're armed with all these different ideas and you're now ready to go ahead and do some boat shopping.
So, first up, location. Don't just look locally on your local doorstep. Look around. A website like Yacht World that we mentioned earlier is very good at showing you what's available all over the world. So you may be living in Canada, but you have ideas about sailing to Asia. Well, why not look at boats in Asia? From our own point of view, we ended up buying in Turkey, and this dictated where we began our journey. And if you want to sail across the Atlantic, well, it's only a hop, skip and jump away anyway. It's not that far. So don't see location as a problem, see it as an advantage, because it will open up a lot more opportunities. The other thing as well is you might find that certain exchange rates play to your advantage.
Do get a surveyor. Unless you are a boat expert yourself, you're going to need some expertise when it comes to working out what you're actually seeing and what there really is there. You must do a survey out of the water, and you really should do a test sail, and if you can, the surveyor should be with you when you do that test sail.
Yeah, I mean, a surveyor will look into things like the state of the rigging. Some of them even use thermal imaging to look at the state of the hull, but as Liz says, they will have a very good idea of what to look out for. And of course, the surveyor will quite often come up with costs that you are going to inherit that you can actually offset against the purchase price. Now bear in mind, like any industry, there are cowboys out there, but there are also good surveyors out there. And if you're not sure, just go on a local forum to find who the recommended surveyors are in your region.
A little bit more on the test sail. If it's a new boat, of course, you get a test sail, easy peasy. If it's a second-hand boat and it's on the hard, a little bit more difficult, because somebody's got to pay to haul it into the water. Then you sail it, and they've got to pay to haul it back out onto the hard, and you need to negotiate between you and the vendor who is going to pay for that. If you're 99% sure that you're going to be buying that boat, then you say that you'll pay for it, and you'll buy it, providing that it doesn't come up with any surprises when it's in the water. If the second-hand boat's already in a marina, then of course a test sail's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so what to look for in a test sail? Well, let's start with boat performance. How does the steering feel?
Can you see over the top of the doghouse or clearly through it if there is one there?
How comfortable is it behind the wheel?
Try tacking and jibing a few times to see how easy it is to handle the lines and the sails.
What about emergency gear?
Can you get to the chart table easily?
Is it easy to use the navigation equipment?
Check all the instruments are working properly.
Do the heads work? Does the sink drain?
The other thing to think about is the actual comfort of being on the boat. Can you get up and down the companionway easily, and can you move around the cockpit? Can you move around the galley and easily access cooking materials and utensils and so forth?
And there's one big one that we haven't mentioned, of course, and that's the engine. So if you're in the marina, you're going to need probably need the engine to get you in and out of the marina. So you're going to want to make sure that that engine is in good nick. So what equipment should the boat have? Well, it depends what you're looking for, but here are some basics. A complete set of sails.
Working winches.
complete running and standing rigging,
navigation equipment,
engine,
bilge pump with manual override,
working galley,
working plumbing,
batteries,
shore power cable,
and other items on the boat that you may wish to consider, life raft,
dinghy and outboard,
solar panels,
wind vane,
wind generator,
and anything else which is on your list. When it comes to settling on a price, remember that a lot of the things you've seen on the boat may need replacing.
Also, don't forget that pretty much every boat that I've ever seen for sale on the market is priced way too high.
Yeah.
And this is often because the person who's selling it calculates the amount of money that they've spent on the boat. So they may have added a new generator at a cost of £7,000. There's a new dinghy at a cost of £2,000, a new outboard. And so they've added these prices up. And of course, that's not really realistic, and from the vendor's point of view, they've got to be prepared to take a hit. As a buyer of boats, that plays to your advantage.
You can use it to negotiate with really well. So that leads on to our next point, which is don't pay the full price. If you're buying a new boat, you don't really have so many options, but there are still ways and means of getting around a little bit of a discount on a new boat. If you go to a boat show, they're nearly always doing promotions. And the other thing you can do at boat shows is it's sales fever. They're desperate to sell, and they might throw in half a dozen extras that they perhaps hadn't thought about before, so try it on. So just to recap, for second-hand boats, never offer the asking price. It's normal practice to go in with a lower offer to show that you're interested.
And don't forget that if the boat is stored in a marina, whether it's on the hard or it's tied up in a mooring, the vendor is having to pay for marina fees, so he's going to be as interested in selling his boat because he's paying for that. So the longer he doesn't sell it, the more money he's spending on storage fees.
Then there's the broker to think about. He's a professional and he wants to get that boat off his books as soon as he can, but he wants to do it for the best possible price. Ask him what he thinks it's worth, and ask him what he thinks the vendor will go to.
Once you've established what that figure is, my advice is knock off 30% and go in with that offer first. I mean, why not? You never know. You've got to start low. And of course, the vendor may turn around and say, absolutely, you're taking the piss. But it may be that they're desperate to sell. I mean, take our situation. It turns out that the owner of Esper, the previous owner of Esper, actually owns 2 boats and wanted to sell both so he could buy a new boat. So by the time we saw Esper, it had been on the market for 2 years already, and he was desperate to sell. Turns out he accepted our offer, our stupidly low offer.
One of the things to remember when you view a boat when the vendor is on board is to be pretty tactful. He's got an emotional attachment to that boat, and it's a very dear thing to him. Now, there might be lots of things that you think are wrong with it, but keep them to yourself. Don't alienate the vendor. Talk about the things that you think might need work or where you can reduce the price with the surveyor or the broker afterwards.
And here is possibly our biggest piece of advice, and that is to hold back 25% of your total budget for post-purchasing repairs, replacements and improvements, because invariably when you buy that either new boat or second-hand boat, there will be things that you'll realise that need replacing or repairing or even putting in, installing as new, and you perhaps won't realise that until afterwards. Yeah. So definitely keep aside 25% of your total budget. We hope that you've found this useful. Don't forget, it's in conjunction with our previous video that we did, and both this video and the last video are all nicely summarised and wrapped up in a downloadable guide which you can get hold of by going to our shop. We'll put a link in the description.
If you've got any comments at all on what you've just seen, we would love to read them. We try to reply to every single one when we have the time. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the time being, peace and fair winds.